mother's silent struggle. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Amelia Chen pushed her cleaning cart down the empty hallway of Blackwood Technologies. It was past midnight, and the towering glass building stood silent except for the soft of air conditioning and the gentle squeak of her cartwheels. Her long black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and her uniform hung loosely on her petite frame. Despite the exhaustion that weighed on her shoulders like a heavy blanket, she moved with quiet determination. 4-year-old Tommy slept peacefully in the small office break room, curled up on a makeshift bed of cushions Amelia had carefully arranged. She had no choice but to bring him with her to work. The babysitter had canceled at the last minute, and missing a shift meant missing rent money. As a single mother working 3 jobs, every dollar counted. Amelia paused outside the break room door, watching her son's chest rise and fall in peaceful slumber. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and his small hand clutched a worn teddy bear. She smiled softly, her heart swelling with love and aching with worry at the same time. Tommy deserved so much more than this life of constant struggle, but she was doing everything she could to provide for him. The building's marble floors gleamed under the artificial lights as Amelia continued her rounds. She had been working here for 6 months, arriving after the business day ended and leaving before dawn. The job paid better than her other positions at the diner and grocery store, but it meant sleeping only 3 hours a night. Still, she never complained. Complaining was a luxury she couldn't afford. The executive's lonely night, 32 floors above. Raphael Blackwood sat in his corner office, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city below. At 35, he had built his technology empire from nothing, transforming a small startup into a billion-dollar corporation. His sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes had graced countless magazine covers, and his name was synonymous with innovation and success. But tonight, success felt hollow. The gleaming awards on his shelves and the expensive artwork on his walls couldn't fill the emptiness that had settled in his chest since his wife's death 3 years ago. Catherine had been his college sweetheart, his business partner, and his best friend. When cancer took her away, it left him with their 7-year-old son, Oliver, and a heart that felt like it would never heal. Raphael loosened his tie and rubbed his tired eyes. He had been working late again, throwing himself into projects and acquisitions to avoid going home to the mansion that felt too big and too quiet. Oliver was staying with his grandmother for the week, and the silence was deafening. He stood up from his leather chair and walked to the window, looking down at the city lights twinkling like stars. The building was supposed to be empty except for security, but as he glanced down at the floors below, he noticed a soft light moving through the offices. Curious, he decided to investigate. Perhaps it was a security guard making rounds, but something about the gentle, methodical movement caught his attention. An unexpected discovery: Amelia was on the 28th floor, carefully dusting the conference room table when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her heart jumped with panic. She wasn't supposed to encounter anyone during her shift, and she certainly wasn't supposed to have Tommy sleeping in the break room. Her mind raced as she tried to think of what to do. "Hello?" A deep, masculine voice called out. Amelia froze. Her cloth still in her hand, she recognized that voice from the company meetings she sometimes overheard while cleaning. It was Raphael Blackwood himself, the CEO and owner of the building. What was he doing here so late? "I'm sorry, sir," she called out softly, her accented English barely above a whisper. "I'm just cleaning. I didn't mean to disturb you." Raphael appeared in the doorway, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. He had expected to find a security guard, not a young woman with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of hard work. She was beautiful in an understated way, with delicate features and an inner strength that seemed to radiate from her despite her obvious nervousness. "You're not disturbing me," he said gently, noting how she clutched the cleaning cloth like a shield. "I was working late and saw the light. I'm Raphael." "Amelia," she replied, surprised by his warm tone. She had expected anger or dismissal, not this gentle introduction. "I worked the night shift." As they spoke, a small sound came from the break room down the hall. Amelia's face went pale, and she glanced nervously in that direction. Raphael noticed her reaction and raised an eyebrow. Is someone else here with you? He asked. Amelia's hands trembled slightly as she set down her cleaning. Supplies. She had been caught and there was no hiding it now. My son, she whispered, barely audible. I had no one to watch him tonight. I know it's against policy, and I understand if you need to fire me. I just needed this job. A father's understanding heart. The vulnerability in her voice hit Raphael. Like a physical blow, thought of Oliver, of the times he had struggled to balance work and parenthood after Catherine's death. The desperation he heard in Amelia's voice was all too familiar. How old is your son? He asked softly. Before Amelia replied, preparing herself for the worst. His name is Tommy. He's sleeping in the break room. He won't cause any trouble. Promise. Instead of anger, Raphael felt a surge of compassion. This woman was clearly doing everything she could to provide for her child, just as he tried to do for Oliver. Can I meet him? Amelia's eyes widened in surprise. This was not the reaction she had expected. Cautiously, she led him to the break room where Tommy lay sleeping. The little boy had kicked off his blanket, and his teddy bear had fallen to the floor. Raphael quietly picked up the stuffed animal and gently placed it back in Tommy's arms. He looks like a good kid, Raphael whispered. He is, Amelia replied, her voice thick with emotion. He's everything to me. In the dim light of the break room, there was something familiar about her, though he couldn't place what it was. Her dedication to her son reminded him of his own mother, who had worked multiple jobs to support him and his sister after their father left. Where is his father? Raphael asked gently. Amelia's jaw tightened slightly. Not in the picture. Just Tommy and me. The pain in her voice was unmistakable, and Raphael felt an unexpected urge to comfort her. Being a single parent isn't easy, he said. I lost my wife 3 years ago. My son Oliver is 7 now. Something shifted between them in that moment. Were no longer CEO and cleaning lady, but two parents who understood the weight of raising a child alone. The barriers of social class and corporate hierarchy seemed to dissolve in the quiet break room where a little boy slept peacefully. Seeds of connection. I should let you get back to your work, Raphael said finally, though he found himself reluctant to leave. Thank you, Amelia said, her voice barely above a whisper, for not firing me, for understanding. What time do you finish your shift? He asked. Around 6 in the morning, she replied, puzzled by his question. That's a long night. Do you have other jobs? Amelia nodded, embarrassed. I work at Murphy's Diner during lunch hours and stock shelves at the grocery store on weekends. Raphael felt a stab of admiration mixed with concern. This woman was working herself to exhaustion to provide for her son. He thought of his own privileged upbringing and felt humbled by her strength. If you ever need anything, he said, pulling out his business card and writing his personal number on the back, please don't hesitate to call. Amelia stared at the card in disbelief. I don't understand. Sometimes we all need help, Raphael said simply, and sometimes help comes from unexpected places. As he walked back to the elevator, Raphael couldn't shake the image of Amelia's gentle hands tucking the blanket around her sleeping son. There was something about her that stirred feelings he thought had died with Catherine, he told himself. It was just compassion for a fellow parent, but deep down, he knew it was something more. Meanwhile, Amelia stood in the break room, turning the business card over in her hands. She had heard stories about Raphael Blackwood, the brilliant and ruthless businessman who built an empire. But the man she had just met was different, kind, understanding, and unexpectedly human. As the night wore on, both of them found their thoughts returning to that unexpected encounter. Neither realized that this chance meeting would change both their lives forever, setting in motion a love story that would overcome every obstacle in its path. The city lights continued to twinkle outside the towering glass windows, and in the quiet building where their worlds had collided, something beautiful had begun to bloom. Love, they would both discover, had a way of finding you when you least expected it and needed it most. A chance encounter in daylight. 3 weeks had passed since that fateful night in the office building. Amelia had thought about Raphael's kindness countless times, but she never expected to see him again outside the corporate walls. She was rushing through downtown with Tommy in tow, her arms full of groceries from her discount shopping trip. When fate intervened once more, Tommy broke free from her hand and chased a colorful balloon that had escaped from a nearby vendor. Amelia's heart jumped into her throat as she watched her son dart toward the busy street. She dropped her groceries and ran after him, but someone else was faster. Raphael Blackwood scooped up the little boy just before he reached the curb, his strong arms securing Tommy safely against his chest. The businessman had been walking to a lunch meeting when he spotted the familiar woman and child across the street. "Mommy." Tommy giggled, completely unaware of the danger he had been in. "Tommy?" Amelia gasped, reaching them with tears in her eyes.
"Thank you,"
she whispered to Raphael, her voice shaking. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here." Raphael handed Tommy back to his mother, their fingers brushing briefly in the exchange. The contact sent an unexpected warmth through both of them. "You both all right?" he asked gently. Amelia nodded, though she was clearly shaken. Her groceries were scattered across the sidewalk, and she looked overwhelmed. Without thinking, Raphael began helping her collect the scattered items, noting the simple, inexpensive brand she had chosen. "Let me buy you both lunch," he offered. "After a scare like that, you could probably use a moment to catch your breath." Amelia hesitated. "I couldn't impose. You probably have important meetings." "Nothing more important than making sure you're both okay," Raphael replied, and he meant it. There was something about this woman and her son that made everything else seemed less urgent. Memories awakened, they found themselves in a small family diner several blocks away from the business district. Tommy was delighted with his chocolate chip pancakes, chattering happily about the balloon and his new friend. Amelia watched Raphael interact with her son, surprised by how naturally he connected with the little boy. "You're good with children," she observed. "I have a son," Raphael replied. "Oliver. He's 7. Sometimes I feel like I'm failing him, trying to be both mother and father." "I understand that feeling," Amelia said softly. "Every day I wonder if I'm enough for Tommy." As they talked, something nagged at the back of Raphael's mind. The way Amelia smiled, the sound of her laugh, even the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, all seemed hauntingly familiar. Finally, he couldn't ignore it anymore. "Amelia? What's your last name?" he asked. "Chen," she replied. "Well, it was Rodriguez before I got married. Why?" Raphael's eyes widened. "Rodriguez. Did you grow up on Maple Street, near the old elementary school?" Amelia's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Yes, how did you know that?" "'Cause I lived 3 houses down." "From you," Raphael said, his voice filled with wonder. "You're Amy Rodriguez? You used to share your lunch with me when my mom forgot to pack mine. You had pigtails and always wore that pink backpack with the butterfly patches." The color drained from Amelia's face as memories came flooding back. "Rafe? Little Rafe Blackwood? But you moved away when we were 10. "My family lost our house," Raphael said quietly. "We had to move across town. I always wondered what happened to the girl who was kind to everyone, even the weird kid whose clothes never quite fit right." Tommy looked back and forth between the adults, sensing something important was happening, but not understanding what. Amelia reached across the table and touched Raphael's hand, her eyes filling with tears. "I can't believe it's really you," she whispered. "You look so different." "So do you," he replied, intertwining their fingers. "Beautiful." Worlds apart, the reunion was magical, but reality soon intruded. Over the following weeks, Raphael found excuses to visit the building during Amelia's shift. They would talk for hours about their childhood, their dreams, and their struggles as single parents. The connection between them grew stronger with each conversation. Raphael learned that Amelia had married young to escape her troubled home life, only to discover that her husband was abusive. She had fled with Tommy when he was just a baby, leaving behind everything except her determination to give her son a better life. Amelia discovered that Raphael's rise to success had been driven by the poverty of his childhood. He had sworn never to feel powerless again, building his empire as a fortress against the helplessness he had once known. Despite their growing feelings for each other, the gap between their worlds seemed insurmountable. Raphael's social circle consisted of politicians, celebrities, and business moguls. Amelia's life revolved around work schedules, daycare pickup times, and stretching every dollar. "This is crazy," Amelia said one night as they sat in the empty conference room where they often met. Raphael Blackwood. You could have anyone you want. I want you, he replied simply. I've wanted you since that first night when I saw how much you love your son. Since I remembered the girl who gave me half her sandwich every day without expecting anything in return. But what would people say? Your business associates, your friends? Raphael moved closer to her on the leather couch. I don't care what they say, do you? Before Amelia could answer, he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her gently. It was a kiss filled with years of separation, childhood memories, and the promise of something beautiful. When they broke apart, both were breathless. I'm scared, Amelia whispered. So am I, Raphael admitted. But I'm more scared of losing you again. Love's first test, their secret relationship blossomed over the next month. Raphael would take Tommy and Amelia on private outings to places where they wouldn't be recognized. They visited quiet parks, small museums, and family restaurants off the beaten path. Tommy adored Raphael, who seemed to understand exactly how to make the little boy laugh. The first real test came when Raphael's assistant accidentally scheduled a board meeting in the conference room where he and Amelia usually met. The board members arrived early and found Raphael sitting close to Amelia, clearly engaged in an intimate conversation. Raphael, said board member Jonathan Hayes, his voice cold with disapproval. I wasn't aware you were meeting with the cleaning staff. The room fell silent. Amelia stood quickly, her face burning with embarrassment. I should go, she whispered. Oh, no, Raphael said firmly, standing beside her. Amelia, I'd like you to meet my board of directors. Gentlemen, this is Amelia Chen, a very dear friend of mine. Tension in the room was palpable. Several board members exchanged meaningful glances, and Amelia could feel their judgment like a physical weight. Raphael Hayes said after the awkward introductions, Perhaps we should reschedule this meeting. That won't be necessary, Raphael replied coolly. Amelia was just leaving, but I want it clearly understood that my personal relationships are not subject to board approval. After Amelia left, the meeting was uncomfortable. Hayes and several other members made thinly veiled comments about inappropriate associations and company image. Raphael listened in stony silence, his jaw clenched with anger. Are you quite finished? He asked when they had aired their concerns. Raphael, we're only thinking of what's best for the company, Hayes said. Surely you understand the optics of this situation? What I understand, Raphael replied, his voice dangerously quiet, is that some of you seem to think you have a say in my private life. Let me be very clear that you do not. Fighting for love that evening, Raphael found Amelia in the building's parking garage, loading her car with cleaning supplies. Wow. She had been crying. Amy, he said softly, using her childhood nickname. She turned to face him, her eyes red-rimmed. I heard what happened in the meeting. Someone told me the board members were asking questions about me. Doesn't matter what they think. Yes, it does, Amelia said firmly. This is your life's work, Rafe. I won't be the reason you lose everything you've built. You're not going to make me choose, Raphael said, stepping closer, because there's no choice to make. I choose you. I choose us. And what about Tommy? What about Oliver? What kind of life would they have with all the scrutiny and judgment? Raphael took her hands in his. They would have a life filled with love. Tommy would have a father who adores him, and Oliver would have a mother who shows him what kindness looks like. It's not that simple. Love is never simple, Raphael replied. But it's worth fighting for. You taught me that when we were kids. And you're teaching me again now? He pulled her into his arms and held her close. I lost you once because circumstances tore us apart. I won't lose you again because other people think they know what's best for us. Amelia buried her face in his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. Despite all her fears, she knew she loved him completely. Just as she had loved that awkward little boy with the kind heart all those years ago. A mother's courage 2 months after the confrontation with the board, Amelia made a decision that would change everything. She had been offered a position at a different company, one that paid better and had normal daytime hours. It would mean leaving her night job and rarely seeing Raphael, but it would also mean a more stable life for Tommy. She was preparing to tell Raphael about the offer when an unexpected visitor arrived at her small apartment. It was an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, impeccably dressed but with a warm smile. "Are you Amelia Chen?" the woman asked. "Yes, may I help you?" "I'm Margaret Blackwood, Raphael's mother. May I come in?" Amelia's heart nearly stopped. She had heard about Margaret Blackwood, a formidable woman who had raised Raphael and his sister as a single mother after their father abandoned them. What could she possibly want? Margaret entered the modest apartment and immediately noticed Tommy playing with his toy cars on the floor. Her expression softened as she watched the little boy. "He's beautiful," she said genuinely. "Raphael has told me so much about both of you." "He has?" Amelia asked, surprised. "Oh yes. He lights up when he talks about you and Tommy. I haven't seen him this happy since before Catherine died." Margaret settled on the couch beside Amelia. "Tell me, dear, do you love my son?" The direct question caught Amelia off guard. Yes, I do. Very much, and he loves you." "That much is obvious. So why are you both making this so complicated?" Amelia looked down at her hands. "Because we come from different worlds. Because people think I'm not good enough for him." Margaret laughed, a rich sound that filled the room. "Do you know what I was doing when I met Raphael's father? I was working as a waitress in a truck stop diner. He was a traveling salesman who thought he was too good for small-town life. The difference was, I believed him." She reached over and took Amelia's hand. "Don't make my mistake. Don't let other people's opinions steal your happiness. Board members, his business associates, will learn to accept you, or they'll find new jobs," Margaret said firmly. "My son didn't build that company to impress shallow people. He built it to prove that worth isn't determined by where you come from." Margaret stayed for dinner, charming Tommy and sharing stories about Raphael's childhood that made Amelia laugh until her sides hurt. When she left, she hugged Amelia tightly. "Welcome to the family, dear. It's about time Raphael found his way back to you." The truth revealed that same evening, Raphael was having his own life-changing conversation. Oliver had been unusually quiet. During dinner, pushing his food around his plate instead of eating. "What's wrong, buddy?" Raphael asked. "Dad, are you going to marry Amelia?" Oliver asked suddenly. Raphael nearly choked on his water. "What makes you ask that?" "'Cause you smile when you talk about her. Hey. And you smile when you talk about Tommy. You haven't smiled like that since Mom died." Raphael set down his fork and really looked at his son. When had Oliver become so perceptive? "Would that bother you if I did marry her?" Oliver considered this seriously. "Will she be nice to me like she is to Tommy?" "Yes, she will. Amelia has enough love in her heart for both of you. And will Tommy be my brother, if you want him to?" Oliver nodded solemnly. "I think Mom would like Amelia. She always said you needed someone who would take care of your heart." That night, Raphael sat in his study, staring at a small velvet box he had purchased weeks ago, but hadn't had the courage to open. Catherine's picture smiled at him from the mantel. And for the first time since her death, he felt at peace with the idea of loving someone else. "I hope you approve," he whispered to the photograph. "She's everything you said I needed." A love declaration the next day, Raphael appeared at Amelia's apartment with Oliver and a picnic basket. "We're going somewhere special," he announced. Drove to the old neighborhood where they had grown up, to the elementary school where they had first met. The playground was smaller than either of them remembered, but the oak tree where they used to eat lunch together was still there. "This is where I fell in love with you the first time," Raphael said, as they spread a blanket under the tree.
"Hey, when?"
"You gave me half your peanut butter sandwich and told me everyone deserves to have enough to eat." Amelia watched Tommy and Oliver play together on the swings, their laughter echoing across the playground. "They get along so well," she observed. "They're going to be brothers," Raphael said quietly. Amelia turned to look at him, her heart racing. Rafe. He was on one knee beside the blanket, holding out a ring that sparkled in the afternoon sunlight. "Amelia Rodriguez Chen, you saved my life twice. Once when we were children and you showed me what kindness looked like. And again when you reminded me that love doesn't have to end with loss." Tears streamed down Amelia's face as he continued. "I love your courage, your strength, your huge heart that has room for everyone who needs it. I love the way you make Tommy laugh and the way you've helped Oliver smile again. I love the woman you've become and the girl you've always been." Tommy and Oliver had stopped playing and were watching with wide eyes. Will you marry me? Will you? Let me spend the rest of my life proving that love is stronger than any obstacle? Amelia's voice was thick with emotion as she answered, Yes, yes, of course I'll marry you. As Raphael slipped the ring onto her finger, Tommy ran over and threw his arms around both of them. Oliver followed more cautiously, but when Amelia opened her arm to include him in the hug, his face lit up with joy. Forever begins 6 months later. They were married in a small ceremony in the garden of Raphael's estate. Amelia wore a simple white dress that made her look like an angel, and both boys served as ring bearers. Giggling as they walked down the aisle together, Margaret Blackwood sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Even some of the board members, who had initially opposed the relationship, were in attendance. Won over by Amelia's grace and the obvious happiness of their CEO, the ceremony was officiated by the same pastor, who had married Raphael and Catherine, and in his blessing he spoke about how love doesn't diminish when shared but grows stronger. True love, he said, looking at the couple, is not about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be perfect for them. During their first dance, as husband and wife, Raphael whispered in Amelia's ear, Do you remember what you used to say when we were kids? When I was scared about moving away, Amelia smiled through her tears, that if two people are meant to be together, they'll find each other again no matter what. You were right, he said, spinning her gently. We found each other. As the evening wore on, Tommy and Oliver ran around the garden with the other children, already inseparable. Amelia watched them play, while Raphael's arms encircled her from behind. No regrets? He asked softly. Only one, she replied, leaning back against his chest. What's that? That we lost so many years? Then we'll have to make the rest count double, Raphael said, kissing her temple. The moon rose over their celebration, casting silver light on a love story that had begun in childhood innocence, survived years of separation, and triumphed over every obstacle. Amelia and Raphael had learned that true love doesn't know boundaries of class or circumstance, only knows the human heart and its infinite capacity for connection. As the last guests departed, they tucked their boys into bed in their new home. Amelia and Raphael stood together on the balcony overlooking the city where their paths had crossed again. What are you thinking about? Raphael asked. About how sometimes the most beautiful love stories start with the simplest acts of kindness, Amelia replied. A shared sandwich, a comforting word to a lost child, a second chance. And sometimes, Raphael added, pulling her closer, they start with two people who are always meant to find each other, no matter how long it takes. In the distance, the lights of the city twinkled like stars, and somewhere in those lights, other love stories were beginning. Other hearts were finding their way home. But for Amelia and Raphael, the searching was over. They had found their forever in each other's arms, proving that love truly is the most powerful force in any world.